finding these elements like that are absolutely critical for us to be passionate and excited, and we like it actually makes it easier to do our best work, right? So, and those common denominators for all of us across the board, where we're like, man, I love doing this stuff. It's actually meaningful and fulfilling, and I'm good at it, or I can get better at it, or I'm driven to it. It lights us up, and we do life. We do life in such a better way. Rachel and I were having, you guys, we like to see ourselves as philosophers. We're philosophers, and so we philosophize all the time. We do a lot of philosophizing or philosophizing or whatever that is, but we love it. And we were just talking about it before this meeting, how if you look at humanity as a whole and the history of the earth, you're like, yeah, there's a lot of suffering. Like suffering's the common denominator, right? And there is, it's true. If you look at the bulk of humanity, you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. And when people are like, life is just suffering, you're like, okay, I can see how you can argue that, right? And it's there's a lot of suffering, right? And we're all going to go through hard things. But man, I am convinced, because we have lived it and we've left suffering. Well, and
let's clarify that. We've left suffering that we create for ourselves as much as possible.
Right. Well, yeah, life still happens, right? But
your brother still dies.
Yeah.
There's still things that happen.
Yeah, there's still negative things
like
that happen.
Suffering is completely gone.
Right. It's just like nothing ever happens. But I guess my point is, when I say suffering,
as much self-caused suffering.
Yeah, exactly. Self-sabotage and the unnecessary suffering. Yes, thank you. And like we can live with more bliss and joy and passion. It's possible. It's available. It
takes work.
It takes lots of work. And that's what you were just talking about. You're like, hey, I got to get in and do the work for this stuff. But first, it takes getting clarity about a real target, a target that lights you up. And please, all of you, please make sure every day when you get up, you have a target. You have something you're aiming for, something you're excited about, something that lights you up.
Even if that target is getting clarity. And I love just listening to Nathan talk here, because I can see this process that we all go through. We've been through this, of just getting clarity and awareness, just thinking through your life and pinpointing, that brings me meaning, that brings me meaning, that brings me purpose. And then identifying how you can have more of that in your life. That's how it happens. That's how it works. Most people just go through life on default, and they just allow whatever happens to happen, and never taking the time or opportunity to identify those things, right? And so if you don't do that, then you're not intentional about having more of those things.
And sometimes it's honestly that simple, you guys. It's just a lack of intentionality. It's just letting things happen that you don't really like that much, but you just keep letting them happen.
Well, one of the things Greg likes to say that I find more and more true is you get what you tolerate. And as long as you continue to tolerate work you don't like, and a place you don't like to live, and the relationships that make you upset, and the amount of money you're making, as long as you continue to tolerate those things, you continue to get those things. And it seems I used to think, for me, it seems kind of stuck up. Like, I'm not going to put up with that. Like, that's a stuck up approach to life. But you can do it with humility, I think. And you can do it with gratitude, of saying, I'm not going to tolerate that anymore.
So you're setting a standard.
You're setting a standard. I'm no longer going to allow myself to operate at this level, to accept this behavior, to accept this treatment, to accept this income. Like, I'm not going to tolerate it anymore.
And can I jump in there really quick?
Please.
So that reminded me, when you were talking about that I built this system a couple of weeks ago. I don't even know, maybe it's been a month or more now, for just having our kitchen clean and the girls' bedroom and stuff. And was really a struggle for the first couple of weeks, but it would eventually happen because they wanted their electronics, and so they'd eventually clean up everything. But now it's like there's not even a fight, and people just like, you know, they're not always right away, but it's like they won't come to me when they want electronics. They'll be like, guys, we have got to do the kitchen. And then they work on it. And so it's like awesome. And I also wanted to share, this is the board I made. It's on our fridge. I don't know if you can see it well, but it's got little magnets with all the different things on it and different people, and they move them. So it's working.
Yeah,
That's
buddy, that is
awesome.
awesome. Huge win right
Fantastic.
there, man.
Yeah, what a great success.
And it's training. And I love how I love you said it. It takes the first couple of weeks for people and the resistance to kind of work through that and be like, okay, all right. And where it comes down to, you guys, is that we as parents say, no, I'm going to kindly and gently but firmly hold the ground here. I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. And then they're like, and then finally they start doing it, and it's awesome. So way to go. Love that. That's great. Love that. So you guys, all of you, and again, watching the recording, everyone stop and just think, like, are there things you're tolerating that are causing suffering in your life? Do you find yourself irritated or frustrated or bothered often, and it's something you can, that's optional, it's a choice, and you're just tolerating it,
which you may not be aware of until you take that pause and take that moment of consideration and awareness. Because again, often we don't think, we just think, oh, this is just how things are. Right. I just have to deal with this. But often if we take a moment and think about it, even something like the kitchen being a mess, and say, wait, do I have to tolerate this, or is there something I can do about it? And when we decide, yeah, I don't want this anymore, it's causing too much pain and suffering, I'm going to eliminate it, then that's when we make the change. And that's how we, little by little, bit by bit, eliminate optional suffering from our lives.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And when we take absolute ownership of everything, and we stop and say, you know what, I don't like this employer, and we change it. Or I don't like an employee, change that person. Or I don't like where we live, I don't like the condition of my house, I don't like the condition of my body, no mas. And we raise a standard.
That's no more.
And we raise the standard, and then it starts to change. It's so awesome. So awesome. Okay, anyways, little side note there. That's not even today's topic. Today's topic comes from so our boys, it started with our 15-year-old son. He came to me about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he says, Dad, have you ever heard of Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus? And I was like, yeah, it's a great classic book about marriage. He's like, well, can I listen to it? I'm like, of course, buddy, go for it. So we got it on Audible. He pounded it, and he just came back. He was like, Dad, that was so good. He's like, I learned so much about women. He's like, I learned more about myself. I learned so much about me. It was amazing. And I was like, fantastic, buddy. He tells his older brother.
Yeah, I was just going to say, he told all his siblings, his older siblings.
And so then Parker, who's 17, listens to almost all of it in the first day. And he's like, wow, this is really good. And they told their sisters, and they kept talking about it. And so I'm like, I'm going to listen to it. So I listened to it. And then Rachel just finished it like day before yesterday.
I'd read it. I don't know if you'd read it. I'd read it years ago. And yeah, so anyways, I just finished it. We drove from Guatemala to Mexico this week. Oh, crazy things happened. But I listened to that on the way. So anyways, we all just listened to it.
And our oldest daughter then
we've been
listening
talking
to it. So we're talking to it. But as I was listening to it, he kept saying things in passing. It wasn't his point. He would say them in passing. And I was like, oh, we have to talk about that in our coaching group, right? We have to cover that in our coaching group. And here's what he kept saying. He would say, my client came to me and she picked up this thing from her parents, or he saw this in his parents. And he just kept saying it again and again and again and again. And when I realized that so many adults learned their mindsets and behaviors for marriage from watching their parents. And he would say things like, my mom, or, so and so's mom constantly nagged his dad. So when he went into marriage, like he had some kind of reaction to his wife asking for stuff, right? Because what he saw, the pattern he saw in his own home growing up, created a reaction in his own marriage. Or he'd say this woman saw that her dad never listened to her mom. And so her mom never felt heard or understood or loved. And so she went into marriage already feeling that. Like, just not, I'm not going to get what I need here. My needs aren't going to be met. Anyways, he gives all these examples, and tons of examples. But what I wanted to hit today and touch on today is that, and I know this is sobering.
Well, and I think this is actually two parts. I know the part you're going to say. I'm going to add this part first. One is we need to look closely at what we're doing in our own marriage and see where that came from, because it likely, very likely, came from the behavior of our parents or some other role models in our early life. So that's one part of it. Like, we have to be aware of that, because again, without the awareness piece, then we might just feel like, oh, this is just how I feel, and how I feel is justified and correct, and how you feel is wrong, when it might be some sort of programming, conditioning. Or someone used this example before that I liked, like, you had this app installed in your brain when you were 12 and you haven't updated that app, right? So you had some ideas about marriage or relationships and how they work installed in your brain when you were a kid, and you've never updated that app, and you've carried that old non-functioning app into your marriage, and it's obviously causing bugs and issues because it hasn't been updated and it needs to be updated. So that's one part of it.
And while you're describing that, I'm sitting here thinking, you know how unfair this is? The only marriage you get to see up close, unless, I don't think you guys would live with other married people like for a while. That would be, maybe you're like, yeah, we lived with so-and-so forever. I got to see their marriage up close. That would be rare. For most of us, the only marriage you get to see up close is your parents. And if your parents didn't do a good job, which,
unfortunately, it's the statistic.
That's the likelihood is your parents didn't do a great job.
My parents were better than your parents.
My parents did not do a great job. I saw a whole lot of what not to do. But the likelihood is, for the vast majority of us, the only marriage we see really up close for a long term is our parents' marriage. And again, as children, we don't have the cognitive whereabouts to step back and go, I can see that dad's not listening to mom and not fulfilling her needs, and mom's not really connecting with dad, and they're both misunderstanding each other's love languages. I'm going to make some notes for that, and when I get married, things will be different. You don't do that when you're 10. You probably don't do it when you're 20, and you're just thinking, oh, okay. And so when Rachel's describing this is marriage, right? When she was saying, well, this is the way I am, you also say, this is the way marriage is. And so
I have a 15-year-old who's taking notes on us.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Right? So, but the likelihood is you observed your parents do things, and you may have just inadvertently picked things up. So I love Rachel's invitation for all of us. Please, 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 please.
Update your apps.
Update your apps, people.
Well,
update the software.
Here's a funny story. When I was a kid, my dad loved Christmas. And he always did the Christmas lights. He always hung the Christmas lights. We always went and picked out a real tree, and he hung the Christmas lights on the Christmas tree. Like, he just loved Christmas. That was his thing. Well, obviously, I just thought that's what men do, right? Men pick out the Christmas tree and they hang the Christmas lights. So when we were newly married, I was kind of like, why aren't you like hanging the Christmas lights and stuff? Like, why aren't you initiating going to get a tree? What's going on here, right? Because that was the installed app in my brain, was in a marriage, the husband does the Christmas tree and the lights. Well,
And the
Greg
assumption
didn't care
was
as much.
the assumption was that's his role, and he knows that's his role.
Exactly. That was the assumption. Well, I learned gratefully that, oh, well, if I really care about that stuff, I should do it instead of expecting Greg to do. So I do the tree and I do the lights because I care about that more than he did. He didn't have that same, his family was, you know, obviously a mess. His mom was married, divorced, all this stuff. Like, he didn't have the same continuity of Christmas traditions that I had in my family. And so obviously he didn't have the same software installed. So there was, for him, it was like, I think even when we got married, you really didn't even care about Christmas that much. You were just like, whatever.
I had had a few Christmases.
You'd had some painful Christmases.
Yeah. Before I met you, I'd had some pretty lonely, discouraging
Yeah.
Christmases.
So
like,
you were like,
whew,
it's Christmas.
okay.
Like,
Right.
So
Which was my programming.
Right.
That I had to revisit.
Anyways, so that's just one example of, like, I had certain expectations and I had to alter those expectations because it wasn't a definition of how marriage should be. It was just the expectations I had grown up with that aren't universal, if that makes sense. Christmas lights.
And so I like, please think about this, examine this in yourself. Like, what did you pick up from your parents' marriage that's maybe having an effect in yours? And I would probably guess that almost all of us have something we can examine there.
You cannot go through your whole childhood and not pick up ideas about what marriage should be like, what men and women's relationships should be like. It's not possible. So I know all of us have some of that programming. The key is to become aware of it and examine it and try to update it. And see, that's the key.
And see what's serving us and what's not serving us. Who's with me? Who's with us on this? This is the you guys rolling here. You're like, yeah, oh yeah, I saw this. And we pick up these ideas about marriage and
taking out the trash, or
all of it. Well, just
sex, or
meeting, talking, conversation,
disagreeing.
What meant, yeah, all of it, challenges and all of that stuff. Like that. This is huge, man. This stuff is massive. So make the effort, please, to work through that and examine it and update the software. But here's okay, one, because that'll totally transform the quality of your marriage. You with me? You with me? Right? That will totally transform your relationship if you carefully examine what you picked up along the way and what you brought into your marriage, and down to the interactions and behaviors and patterns and habits and mindsets. Some of you might have a very fixed mindset around certain elements of your marriage and your relationships. And you might have very established beliefs. All right. You guys, everything you believe isn't true. Sorry to break that on you today. Sorry, not sorry. Everything we believe isn't always true, right? Recently, I had some experiences in meeting with people where these beliefs would come up like, well, the only way I can ever feel successful is XYZ. And that was a belief. I'm like, wow, that's, as long as you believe that, you're going to not feel very successful ever. Other people say the only way I ever will feel that I'm lovable is ABC. I'm like, well, that's a belief that's not serving you. And we come up with these rules and beliefs, and a lot of it built into marriage. But the big thing I wanted to focus on today is what he said in this book. And for those of you who are just joining us, our whole family went through Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And he just kept talking about how most people bring into marriage what they pick up from watching their parents' marriage. And when I heard that, I wanted to talk to this group especially and have a really open conversation. I'd love your feedback and comments today and really talk through this. Is the interactions, the things we do in and out day after day, patterns, routines, rituals, mindsets, the things we say, the reactions we have, the patterns, habits, all of that are setting up programming in our kids that they will carry into their marriage and
First
their
of all,
relationships.
it's the programming you received from your parents that you have carried into your marriage. And then it's also the programming that you're programming your kids with that they will carry into their relationships. Now, I want to add something about that we already said, because I think one of the most powerful things that people can learn how to do, because I know that Greg did this, and I think to some degree we all have to learn how to do this no matter what our background, even if we had a happy childhood or, this and that and the other. Everything that happens to you, again, like he said, not all of your beliefs are true, and everything that happened to you wasn't necessarily true, meaning that we often give a meaning or an interpretation to something that happened in our past and in our childhood that we carry with us through our life, but may not be 100% accurate. Because, for one thing, you were children when you made that, you were a child when you made that conclusion.
Whew.
So the conclusion may be off. So one of the things Greg did that was very powerful in helping him to change his life and to create the life he wanted was going through his past and giving new meaning to the things that happened to him. Because whatever happened in the past has happened. And currently you're giving it a specific meaning or a specific interpretation, but you can, in your mind, go back into those past events and give them a new meaning. So instead of it being, oh, I'm a victim and I'm never going to get married, or I'm not going to have a happy marriage because this happened to me as a child, you can reinterpret that. And you can look back at that and say, because those things happened to me, because I experienced those hardships, I'm going to do these things. I'm going to have a happy marriage. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to whatever. So I just wanted to emphasize that and point that out, because we don't have to feel like, oh, because and that includes with everything, even terrible things, even abuse, even all sorts of horrible things that happen in your life. This is essentially what they do in clinical psychology, is they walk back and you can give a new meaning to that. And you can use it to empower you instead of to disempower you.
Whew. The first step, though, I feel like I'm just repeating myself so much here, but I want to drive this home. The very first step is awareness. He tells this story in the book. He's working with this lady and he's like, yeah, the way our parents interacted affected the way we feel about our own marriage. And she's like, no, my parents' marriage didn't affect me at all. And he's like, oh yeah, tell me about your marriage. And he's like, well, they got divorced. And she's like, oh.
Well, because I remember that story. The story was about, she was feeling rejected in her marriage. And he brought that point up. Well, what happens in our parents' marriages often can carry over into our marriage. And she's like,
if your mom felt
true.
Rejected, then you might feel rejected.
She's like, no, that's not true. My parents got divorced, but it was a very happy, experience. They were very polite about it. Of course, my mom didn't feel. And then when she got to rejected, burst into tears, because she's like, well, yeah, obviously my mom had a sense of being rejected.
They got divorced.
Her marriage ended. So yeah, we're often not always aware of these things, but it is the awareness that brings us the power.
Okay, so let's dive into the details. Let's get real specific here. Let's all come up with examples, and you can share them in the chat. You can jump on mic here. I want to talk through the details, the patterns, the habits, the actions, reactions, the mindsets, the framework, everything that all of the elements of our marriage that our kids are observing day in and day out that are likely to impact their marriage. You with me? Like, this is so valuable. This is so powerful. Because right now, Rachel and I, day in and day out,
We are programming our children.
we're programming our kids. And guess what? You and your spouse are doing the same thing every day in and day out. You are programming your kids in lots of things. But today we're going to talk about how you're programming them of how they're going to operate in their marriage. And that's just a reality. And the research is there. He worked with thousands and thousands of couples. He did so much research, and he's just like, this is how it rolls. What they saw from their parents is most often what they carry into their own marriage. So let's come up with examples and ways that we can all be more aware, because the first thing is just bringing awareness
And
and things we can do about it.
obviously, awareness is not always pleasant. Sometimes it is very painful. But if we want the cure, sometimes we have to take the medicine.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, so let's all come up with examples. This is where you throw out some examples here of things we're doing, or you can even do hypotheticals. You don't have to say, well,
What we do.
hi, my name's Greg, and every time my wife talks to me, I'm on my phone going, yeah, babe, sure,
That does happen on occasion.
That, and if our kids see that pattern repeated, they're going to draw some conclusions. Now, I don't know what conclusions they're going to draw. They might say, oh, okay, I can do that. Or they might say, dirty rotten. My dad never listened to my mom. Right? You see what I'm saying?
The challenge is we don't have the power to choose the conclusions our children draw from certain things.
Because they're kids. They're drawing conclusions as kids that will often stick, like we talked about.
Which is why we also have to give ourselves grace. Now, we're talking about how to improve, how to be better. That's a part of life. But also a part of life is grace, because ultimately, no matter how good you are, you could be perfect and people can still draw erroneous conclusions. But at that point, that's on them. Our point, because we have control over ourselves, is to do what we can do to make the most of it and to make the most of ourselves.
Have we adequately driven this home yet? Are you guys feeling this? Because I'm feeling it. My behavior day in and day out in my home is conditioning and training my kids for how they will interact in their marriage. In a major, major way, I am responsible for how my children perceive and then create their marriages. I got to throw that down. I got to make sure we're all on the same page here.
That's what hit you.
Because it hit me just again and again and again in this book. I'm like, oh man, their parents inadvertently were behaving in a certain way. The kids picked up on it and then went right into their marriages with whatever they picked up. So I want examples here. I thought the chat box would just be exploding by now. I thought people would be fighting to get on the mic, but I want let's talk about this in a real way of how is this tangible and real in our marriages? Like, what are the things, and we can share things that are working, things that we intentionally are doing. We can be just honest and open here and be like, I've actually, now that we're saying this, I've been unintentionally got into this pattern and I noticed my kids picking up on it. Right? So the book we all read was Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Fantastic, great classic on marriage. We highly recommend it for all of you. If you've read it before, reread it. It's great. Okay, let's throw out some examples. How are you doing with showing affection to your spouse? Do you hug each other?
You're more affectionate than I am affectionate.
Do you hold hands? Do you do acts of service? Do you kiss? Do you guys kiss in front of your kids? Now this is like just curiosity. Do you dance? Do you guys ever dance? Are you ever kind of like, ooh, baby, and you smoochy where your kids are like, oh, mom and dad, that's gross. I think just a healthy amount of that is actually a really good thing. When my kids are like, oh, dad, I'm like, yeah, they noticed that I'm. Do you compliment your spouse in front of your kids? Throwing them down here, people. I see.
Good.
How about something simple like how you respond when your spouse comes home? Fantastic example. Thank you for bringing that up. Everyone right now evaluate. When your spouse, well, either way, right? Either you come home or your spouse comes home. It's just simple, but man, day in and day out, we're training the kids. What do you do when your spouse comes home, or what do you do when you get home? Like I'll be like, where's my wife? Where's my babe? And run, and and when I leave, so let's do this. When you get home or when you leave, every time we leave, I'll give Rachel a kiss and say, love you. Right? And our kids see that. So every coming and going, they see us give a little kiss and say, I love you.
Well, and that's a family habit now,
Yeah.
I think.
Totally is.
Yeah.
And what's super cool is the kids, well, okay, that's another one. Do you guys openly express love? Do you say, I love you in your home? While we were on that cruise in the Galapagos, there were a couple of couples.
We had a couple discussions about
marriage and
stuff.
family, and a couple of them, it was hard. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of tears. And they said, look, my parents, when they raised us, we never expressed love. We just never said, I love you. And one friend, and just love him, he in tears, and his family's all grown. His kids are already raised. He said, I wanted to so bad, but I just couldn't. I just couldn't ever say I love you. Because he didn't grow up like that. And so he went through it. And now he raised his whole family. And so he raised all of his kids and never said, I love you. And he was trying, he's like, I wanted to tell him I love him. I just couldn't do it. It was programming. And so maybe some of you don't verbally express your love. And actually, I want to invite you to. I want to invite you to verbally say, I love you more often to your spouse and to your kids. I want your kids to hear it. And if you haven't done it for a while, it might be like,
awkward.
I love you. And they're going to be like, whoa, that was great. That was a great performance, Dad.
Or,
well
as
done.
our kids say, they're like, awkward.
Right? So
that's okay though.
Those are little things like, are you expressing love? So if you're taking notes, let's jot down a few things that you hit, right? We're affectionate enough to embarrass the teens. Yeah, that is good right there. Fantastic. Okay, so if you're taking notes, let's make a little list here. I'm doing this the same way. Okay, what do I want my kids to do? And here's a great way to think about it. What do I want my own marriage to be like? But especially if my kids are watching, what do I want them to have in their marriage? What do I know just works? So I want them expressing their love. So telling my kids to express their love isn't going to be near as powerful if they don't see me and hear me constantly doing it. Now, I didn't grow up like that. But as a teen, you know what I did, you guys? I wanted to be like that. You know how cool this is? This is how I did my reprogramming. I started telling my roommates I loved them. This is how I did it. For reals. 18, 19 years old. I just was like, one night I was like, I got to do this. I've got to learn how to express love. And I really do love my roommate. And so the first night I remember I'd be like, love you, man. And it was silence. And I was like, what did he just say? My roommate just said, I love you. But I do it every night. Hi, man. Love you. Love you, man. Or like I'd go, hey, love you, bro. Thanks for being awesome. And it was so hard for me. It was like awkward. It was like, love you, man. I can't believe I just said that. But I just did it. And then I get new roommates. And I was in the habit. I was like, hey, bro, man, glad you're here. Love you. And he's like, what'd you just say? I'm like, love you, man. and it just I reprogrammed, and so I expressed love. And you know what was awesome?
You still
All
do
of
that.
my roommates, I still do it. I do it with my coaching clients. Love you, man. I did love you, man, and they're like, love you too. It's awesome. But all my roommates, within a few days or a few weeks, they'd be like, hey, love you too. And I know for some of them it was awkward because they didn't express love like that. So it was really cool. Okay, let's see. Yeah, grossing out the kids here. Yeah, nicely done. Okay, so what do you do when you leave? Make a note of that. What do you do when you come in? In fact, do you guys want to share? Do you want? We're open to share here. I want you to talk more. I know some of you are like passive participants, but we're gonna draw some activity out of you, you passive people. Do you have good
Introverts get
ideas?
that.
Yeah, don't force me to
Introverts
talk.
unite in silence.
So if you have good ideas, share them. If you are just like, you know what, we actually haven't been doing anything at the exits and the entrances, and we'd like, go for it.
Somebody?
Somebody turn their mic on. Go for it.
It's Deb, and my face isn't coming up here for
There it
some
is. It's
reason.
up now. We see you in the sunshine.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Pacific Northwest, yay. My husband and I have been married 32 years is coming up this next week, so that's pretty cool. We always give each other a kiss and a pray, and with my kids when they go out, I have my one son lives with us, and so I always pray with him, give him a kiss. But right after we were first married, I'd read some story of one of the presidents of the church back in the 50s who his wife would like wave a little hanky out the window or something when he would go down the street. So I'm like, well, I don't have a hanky, but I started waving at my husband. So literally all of us in our whole family, to my kids and everybody else, anytime anybody leaves, we always wave out the window to them whenever we go. So we still do that.
That's awesome.
Oh, those are so good. So the love, the kiss, the prayer, the wave, right? You're setting up these things that are all beautiful. Now I can imagine some of your kids are like, I got married and my spouse doesn't wave to me. What's going on here?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't asked him.
But that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing that. I love the wave because here's what you do. When you go out, you look back.
Can't see you.
Well, no, I know. Okay, so I leave, right, and I'm looking back and I'm waiting for the wave. It's one more thing of like connection. I love that. That's a beautiful. Thank you for sharing that example. That's a beautiful one. I love that. Here's another one. Comments, and anybody else can just jump on mic if you want. Always a kiss coming and going, and an I love you. Fantastic. Husband always kisses me when he leaves. I know I can be too wrapped up in whatever I'm doing at the time to greet him properly. Yeah, good. And I know there's been times when it was like, hey babe,
Yeah, see ya.
and or coming in like I just come in like, hey guys, I'm back. And I personally was like, well, that's just pretty lame. So when I get home, I'm gonna find my babe and let her know how excited I am to see her. And you guys, you know what that did for me? It actually stirred up the excitement to see her because I wanted to be excited to see her. Now, the cool fun thing is like we work from home, we travel together, we're like always together.
Yeah.
So if I have to go out for an errand, I come back, babe, I missed you. I went
to the store.
I was at the store for like 45 minutes this time. But stir that up. Make it matter. Make it count. Great example. Thanks for sharing those. Okay, what else? What other things? Do you listen? This one's huge. How well do you listen to your spouse? Or how well does your spouse listen to you? Your kids will pick up on that. Man, in some cases, grandkids now, right, guys? Yeah, how awesome is that? Grandkids will pick up on it. Do you listen? Some guys, they plop down in front of the TV and they don't listen. Right? We have some older family friends that do some of that sometimes, and our kids have noticed. They're like, uh-huh. I mean, they'll pay attention. They pick up on it. So that's another one I want to ask them. How well do you listen? Because that's programming. That's imprinting that. All right, help me with other examples. What are other things that our kids are going to pick up on? Okay, here's another one in the comments. I would love more convos when he comes home about our day. And I would say, I'm gonna jump out on a limb here and generalize. I bet most wives would. Right? As a general, not all, but as a general rule, I think most wives will be like, hey, how's your day? And they want details. And the husband's like, good. that's about it. It was good. What do you want? Right? More conversations.
Well, but I think this is good here because she says he's getting better at asking, but sometimes I just tell without being asked. I think that's great. And in the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, he talks about that
a lot.
He said, men are not going to, Martians, obviously, as he calls them, are not going to be prone to just open up and start talking. But the more you talk, not always, but if you can start talking, if they're in the receptive mood for it, that helps them to then open up and start talking and sharing things. So it's almost like they have to be invited to converse with you by you conversing with them. So,
and they need to know how much it means to you just to listen. Yeah. If you let your husband know, it just means so much to me if you just listen.
Yes. That right there, I think, is a key. And that's one of the points that he kept making in the book as well. Like, going both ways here. I have to tell him when he does something that means a lot to me. So, man, I really appreciate it when you ask me about my day when you come home. I really appreciate too when you listen to me when I'm talking about this, or I really appreciate it when you share with me about your day. Like, you have to let your spouse know what it is you appreciate, especially if you want more of it. But yet, if we're prone to, as human beings, focus on what they don't do and nagging what they don't do and complaining about what they're not doing. So law of attraction, like just how things work, what you focus on, you feel, what you focus on, you get. We end up getting more of that instead of more of what we want. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to just go ahead. Don't wait for him to ask. Just go ahead and start talking. But then the next step is kind of like, I really appreciate it when you listen, or I really appreciate it when you share. Like, it makes me feel appreciated, loved, cherished, whatever it is. And that, again, that's one of those things, like saying I love you, maybe if you're out of practice of doing that, it does feel awkward. But the only way it becomes less awkward is if you actually
practice. And your kids will see. Some kids, they might be just in the background of life going, man, my parents never talk. They talk to other people. My mom talks to her mom or girlfriends or whatever. Dad talks to his buddies. They never talk to each other. They might see that. And so the programming might be, guess you don't talk to your spouse. Guess you don't tell your spouse what you're really feeling. Or heaven forbid, some parents, one spouse will complain in front of the kids about the spouse. You with me? Whew. That one makes me sad. If mom's in the other room, dad's like, oh, your mom, or dad leaves and oh man, that kind of stuff. That's
true about all of our family relationships. Like, we try to make it a rule that if there's anything you would like to suggest about improving or doing better or doing differently, like, that's a private matter, whether that's between us or that's between the kids. It's not something that we have to say in front of everybody.
Yeah, you don't publicize it, and if you have something to say about a certain person, you say it to the person, right? So again, like all these little things, I'm just trying to think of all these little daily practices that the kids will pick up on, and it'll be part of their programming. What else? What other ideas? What other examples? What other elements? What are you thinking about here? As we talk about this topic of like, hey, your kids are observing all of your behaviors. What are they picking up? What programming, what training, what conditioning? What are you thinking about? What's something, I'm just trying to throw out questions here.
And
Engage this.
we always approach this in our personal lives and in coaching. We're approaching this with not a guilty, I'm so terrible, I suck,
I've ruined my kids.
I've ruined my life and my kids. It's not that. It's for us, we love growth. We love change. We love becoming better. And so anytime we can notice something we're not doing that great at, that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for improvement. And opportunities are great. They're a good thing.
So yes, Deb, can I ask a question? Absolutely.
Yes.
Please turn on the mic and ask away.
Okay, thanks. We've been married for forever, and when our kids were little, we got 5 grown kids and everything. And when they were little, there was always, lots of contact and affection and everything. And then we had a car accident, and a business failure, anxiety, depression, all kinds of the yuck, which just kind of turned everything upside down. And in some ways, we're still kind of coming back from that a little bit. So for me, I'm trying to build up trust again. And, I'm trying to have my business and move things forward. And he works really hard at his job full time. And anyway, so I'm trying to rebuild that trust and that communication, because it's kind of the opposite. He's always the one that said, "What'd you do today? How'd it go?" And he's the one that we're kind of opposite. If you know about Carol Tuttle energy profiles, he's kind of the 2-4, the real slow, affectionate, deliberate movement. I'm the 1-3 that's like, let's go, 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 or 3-1, that's really intense and focused and let's get it going. So we're kind of opposite that way. He's just super sensitive. I think both of us have a lot of wacky background things that have, we've taken on some of our parents' energies and the way they do things. So anyway, so I'm always in the constant process of trying to heal and get past, and I do the energy and all that stuff, and he's kind of like, well, this is kind of how it is, and he's open to things. But anyway, so I guess my question is, I'm trying to work back to that trust and that high amount of affection, and not just feel like I'm just kind of sitting here. I don't know if that makes sense. I know I hold myself back just because of the things that have happened. And so I'm trying to move forward in a way that's going to help us. Because now we got 3 kids who are married, which is awesome. And, they've all got their own things going on. And for the 2 of them, I can tell that their marriages are really strong. My youngest, I know they've got challenges in a number of areas. But anyway, I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yes, good. Thank you. It's such a great question. And again, I want to start with congratulations. 32 years is no joke, especially if you've all been through some big stuff, right? To get through big stuff and then get your kids married, that's awesome. And I want to point out here, for all of us, when our kids move out, we don't stop influencing and they don't stop noticing. There's still going to be those elements. So that's super cool. So without knowing the details, and that's okay, we don't need to know the details, I love that you want to rebuild trust and you want to lean back into it and you want to rebuild those things. So trust, I actually did a lot of research on this and I did some training videos on it. I really kind of geeked out for a while on trust. I came down to 2 big elements of trust: character and competence, right? So and let me just explain those for all of us. And this is huge. This is huge for kids. It's huge for marriages, business, all of it. One is, do I trust her character? Like, she won't lie to me. She won't steal or cheat. Like, she's a good person or trying to be good. And that allows for mistakes, but that's character. The other trust is competence. Competence in oh, babe, I just totally cut my arm open. Would you sew that back up for me? And she would say,
no.
And
I'm not
and
competent to do that.
Yeah, I got a big cut. I don't trust her competence to sew up my forehead so I don't have a look like Frankenstein, right? Or it could be anything, like driving at night. Yeah,
You don't
What-
trust me to drive it?
no, that's a bad example. But you know what I'm saying? Like, and we could pick anything. There are things that she just doesn't trust me. She's like, sorry, you're not competent at that. And so there's those two main elements. And so as we're building and rebuilding trust, we have to look at both of those things.
And I guess in the details, we have to create this awareness about when I'm trying to rebuild trust, what is it exactly that's holding me back? Is it something related to character? Is it something related to competence? Or I guess I'm just going to throw this in. Is it just something I'm now conditioned to be resistant against, and I have to overcome the resistance? And sometimes the only way to overcome the resistance is just by taking steps forward towards it. Like, it could be baby steps, it could be giant steps, but like moving forward. Like, one of the things they often do in clinical practice of like psychology is, if you're afraid of something, you don't overcome that fear by like building a wall to protect yourself. You overcome the fear by confronting it,
Moving towards it.
and that might be by taking the smallest possible step you can imagine taking right now, but little by little you get closer to facing that fear, and eventually once you actually face it, then you overcome it. So I don't know if it's you're afraid to hold, I'm just coming up with stuff here, but like, you're afraid to hold hands. Well, maybe you start by, let's just touch our hands like this,
hold it up. So
right?
they're up
Let's
and I just touch.
And that's enough. That's all I can do right now, but that's okay.
Pinky.
And little by little, maybe we pinkies, and then, you know, let's just a little example, but that's the idea. Is if it's not about character, if it's not about competence, well, first of all, maybe it is, so then you address those. If it's just about resistance and fear, then you just have to move forward towards it little by little, doing what you can right now, but knowing you're going to keep doing more and more bit by bit.
And I want to share, man, I am so glad you brought this up. This is so profound and so special. So I'm not talking about your case in particular. I'm talking for all of us now, because our kids are going to watch this. You brought up something that's so important here. Are you going to make mistakes in your marriage? Yes. And your children will learn how to recover from that. Is your spouse going to make mistakes in your marriage? Yes. And your children will watch and observe how you handle that. And you don't have to be perfect at it. It doesn't have to be this perfect picture, perfect example.
Perfect, so you produce the perfect programming for your children. It includes all the messiness of life, but the programming has to include, how do you deal with, recover from, work through the messiness of life?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I want to address both sides for a moment, because I think this will be valuable for all of us. If I make a mistake, and it's pretty big, I've lost her trust.
Whether that's a mistake of character or a mistake of
Well,
competence.
that's where I'm going to go. That's where I'm going to go there. So it might be one of character, it might be one of competence. If it's character, oh man, I've got to rebuild a bridge that I burnt. If I burn a bridge of character and she can't trust my character, oh buddy, I've got to rebuild that. And so I have to rebuild my character in such a way, like overdoing it, so she realized, okay, he fixed the gap in character. I can trust his character again. If it was competence, let's say, for example, I said, babe, give me $10,000. I'm going to invest it.
And make us
and I take it and I throw it in an investment and it tanks. That was a mistake in competence. I wasn't very good at it.
I can still trust his character.
Because I didn't steal or cheat or lie or go burn the money or embezzle it.
Or gamble it away. Well,
that could be argued.
Depending on your definition
of investing. But I was investing in Vegas.
If I believe you had the best intentions and that you simply lacked the competence to actually make a wise financial decision in that area, okay.
She's not going to trust me with money anymore.
Competence, but I'm going to question the competence
in that
financial literacy.
So then if I want to earn back that trust, I have to prove competence. Right? Oh,
Maybe he reads books, takes classes, goes to
training,
a coach.
and I paper trade, and I do virtual things, and I rebuild it, and I'm total transparency, babe. I want to earn your trust back. I want to gain more confidence. I'm gonna earn it, and you're gonna watch. So that's from my side. Now let's flip it, and let's say it was on her side.
Or it's the same scenario, but from my side.
Okay, yeah, let's do from your side now.
In that case, I need to be clear, and I need to articulate that. Like, I trust your character. I trust that you're a good person. I trust that you have our best interests at heart, but your money handling skills in that situation did not prove your competence.
Yeah,
in that.
you lacked the competence.
So I don't want you using our money again for something like that.
Now, instead of taking it personal,
Unless-
me being bitter, like, oh, rah, rah, I'll say, okay, babe, what would it take for me to earn that trust back in competence? See that conversation?
I'd
Huge.
like you to take some courses. I'd like you to read some books. I'd like you to do some paper trading.
That's stock
Then-
market stuff, if
yeah.
we're talking about that.
So that's an example of like working through that. But again, it's a complex subject. Trust is not just, oh, trust covers everything. That's not true. It's very complex in that there's lots of layers to it. So we have to get very clear about where the layers are and where the lack of trust might exist, and then what's going to be required to rebuild that, whether it's
What if it was character? Let's walk through this.
okay.
So it was a character issue, and I want to have your trust again. You want to trust me again, but it was a character thing. I had lied or done something dishonest.
Yeah. I think in a case like that, there has to be open, totally transparent communication until I feel like, well, maybe it's forever, but until I at least feel like I don't need it anymore. So maybe I'm allowed to read all your texts, all your emails. I know the password to your phone. I know the password to your computer.
Which
like
we started
total
that way.
transparency.
We started that
still
way, and
operate
we
like
still
that.
operate
I know
that.
everything of it.
I
Like I could pick up his phone at any time and read through everything
and
on
look
his
at
phone.
every
Same with-
single thing I've done, and I can do it with her.
Same
We
with
just
me.
want total transparency. There's never, you guys, I love this idea of like, make it so easy to do what's right and so hard to do what's wrong. I love that philosophy. Like, set up systems and things that just make it like it would be really hard to hide something from her, and I want it that way.
Well, we know this is true because he
'Cause I
tries to
can't
buy
even-
me like a
I
Christmas
can't surprise
gift,
her.
and it's hard to surprise me because I'm like the texts and the emails and the
I have to like leave the house, call my mom, and be like, Mom, I can't use my own card. You buy her a gift. I'll pay you back. I promise. Like, and hide it. Like, because she knows it's
because we
total
have so much
transparency.
transparency. But
So if there's a character thing, and that one's hardest, I would say.
yes, obviously, I think that's definitely harder.
And then I'm going to dialogue. We're going to talk through this and be like, hey, it was dishonesty, and I want to trust you, but I don't.
So there has to be total transparency until I do trust you.
Until
again.
that is rebuilt. And so I hope this is helpful for all of us, everybody here. This is a big general thing, like, because there's going to be faults in competency and character. And there's going to be violations of trust, and there's going to be rebuilding of trust. And oh my goodness, what a beautiful topic for today, to include this in training and teaching our kids.
Life is going to happen. Mistakes are going to be made. My son's most recent saying, he's 17, he's so funny. I asked him to go get me some, we call it saldo in Guatemala. It's credit for your cell phone. You buy some and then it runs out and you have to go to the store and buy more. That's how it works in Guatemala.
Blah.
So I said, go buy me some saldo. Well, he went and he bought the wrong kind. He bought the kind for talking and I wanted the kind for internet usage. So his thing that he always says is, mistakes were made. But that's life. Mistakes are made. They will be made. So, part of teaching our children is, this is what we do when mistakes are made. This is how we work through it. This is how we solve it. This is how we push through. This is how we keep going.
Good. Love that. Okay, here's a comment. One character situation involved really losing it with one of our kids. That could actually be a competency situation too. I don't know the details, but that could be a competency of just
That's right. Yeah.
if I get really angry and I
don't know
how to express it and I just burn a bridge with a kid, that could be a competency thing as well. I don't know the situation, but it could go either way or both. It was almost 10 years ago. The child withdrew, hasn't really forgiven him, and I didn't speak up. And it was during the depression crisis. It still has its effect, and I know it's mostly out of my control, but not outside of your influence. Definitely not outside of your influence. And so some open dialogue, like Rachel and I were trying to express there, some open dialogue would be, hey, I would love, and talking to both of them.
Maybe not together, maybe
yeah, separate.
Maybe separately.
Say,
maybe.
I would love to make this right. I would love for you to make this right. I still, and I don't know, everybody's relationship is at a different level, but where we're at right now, I could go to Rachel or she could come to me and say, hey, honestly, I think the way you handled that
still bothers me.
Yeah,
even
still
though
bothers
it happened
me.
a long time ago and I should be over it, I still see its effects.
So yeah, the effects aren't over.
It affects me.
Yeah.
It bothers me.
So that situation hasn't been resolved. And in order for me to fully love and trust you and bring this back, it feels like that's in between us until you make that right. Would you be willing to make that right? So there's a character competence situation where I can step in and I can make that situation better and earn back her trust.
Now, these discussions are not always easy. We know that. It's painful to reveal old wounds, right? But only real healing can happen when, instead of protecting, we always call it the thorn. Well, it's like the thorn in the flesh. Instead of protecting it and avoiding it and trying to just keep it covered up, we have to rip off that Band-Aid. We have to pull out that thorn, which is a painful process, and allow true healing to occur.
I heard there was a monk, an old monk from, I don't even remember, he's from Tibet maybe, or Nepal, somewhere over there, and he was being interviewed, and it was a simple statement that has struck me so profoundly and stayed with me. He just said, look, emotional wounds that aren't resolved and healed will just continue to bleed for the rest of your life. You can go from one relationship to the next, one job to the next, one location to the next, one addiction to the next. And it doesn't matter what you do, if it never gets healed, it will just continue to bleed. I was like, that is so profound. And so if there's some pain and some bleeding there, it doesn't matter what happens, it'll continue to bleed until it's healed. Now, so you approached both of them separately and didn't go well. I want to invite you to try different approaches, to try different timing, to try, man, this is tough. I'm not going to pretend this is easy, but I am going to say pretty boldly, it really needs to be resolved so that the bleeding stops on both sides, so the pain can heal and the wounds can heal. And man, I wholeheartedly there's solutions to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's challenging because it's with my youngest daughter who's married, and she moved last year. They live in North Carolina, and she's not coming back here anytime soon. And I know it's part of the reason that once she graduated from high school, she was like, I'm gone. And, doesn't even like to come home for holidays and stuff. Cause there are a number of other facets. There's just not that one thing, but it's a lot of different things going on. So I guess I just have to be patient with that because, my husband's like, I don't know why she's so upset about things, and in his mind, he's like, I couldn't help it. There was nothing I could do. Why do you keep bringing that up? And I brought it up like once ever in this whole time. So anyway, there's still stuff going on. So I feel like I'm the juggler or grew up kind of being the peacemaker and trying to make sure that everything is, and I'm the one who's the empathic many of us are, but the one who's acknowledging that and acting, coming from that place. But anyways, yeah, it's just it's a challenge, and it's a real painful thing, and still for me. And anyway, I guess we're just doing the best we can with what's happened.
Thank you for sharing that. We've seen it in our extended family and other things, and even with my siblings, I've seen some challenges and things. And thank you for sharing. That's tough. I do want to say, and I believe it with all my heart, there's a way to reach your husband and help him. I'm sure it's painful, and he probably feels really bad, but a really tactful, influential, loving way for him to take ownership of it and to approach her to apologize.
And I think, first of all, you said something that I think is true. Sometimes it does just take time. And in our minds, we're like, it's been long enough. But time has a way of helping people to see things differently. The other thing that I like to do that I feel works best sometimes when we feel like there's something that's not in our control is essentially this approach of, I guess you can call it letting go and letting God, but being open to, okay, I don't know what I can do, so give me ideas, inspiration, guidance, like something of stories, books, podcasts, like anything, like just anything that might come that I can share, that I can talk about, that I can use to influence, because we're not smart enough, we don't know, but there is definitely a higher power that can help us with that. So it's just kind of this way of not necessarily like, what do I have to say or what do I have to do, but what resources can help them that can be brought into their life or brought into my life. Or so that for me, in a situation like that, that's where I go with that, is searching for those resources that can
That's what I try to do too. and I'll just share the part of, like I said, there's a lot of things, but part of the additional pain is when she and her husband moved, and we're Latter-day Saints, and then she told us a couple months ago that really hard news. Jeff and I decided that we're leaving the church and we're having our names removed, and they were married in the temple, and he's a returned missionary, and she had wanted to be a missionary and everything. So that's like adding another layer of complexity, as all the different pieces kind of go in there. So that's even caused another sense of separation, and all of us are trying not to, and they're like, don't pray for us, don't make us a project, don't send us things, don't it's very, her boundaries are very clear about what they want or not. So anyway, it's just not what we were expecting.
and in that, which those can be so difficult, right? When our family members make choices or try to separate, there's still, man, I just keep coming back to this, you guys, again and again and again, with all the coaching I do, all the experiences I have, the people I get to work with, I still keep coming back to this sense of unbelievable power and influence we have, even within the boundaries other people set. There's still so much we can do. And I don't know, I guess I want to share that hope of there's still so much you can do for your husband and for your daughter, even within those sensitivities and boundaries. We can create those, we can facilitate, foster changes.
And I want to add this, because I find this to be very powerful. I think sometimes the best thing we can do for other people is accept them for exactly where they're at, who they are
in their journey.
Because I know I've seen it in my own family, I've seen it in my extended family, in our marriage even. Like when you accept where they're at, suddenly people feel like, okay.
I don't have to be so defensive.
I don't have to prove my point. I don't have to defend myself.
I don't have to fight back against you because you're not coming with weapons.
Now I actually feel like I can be my best self. And wow, amazingly enough, that best self ends up going where you wanted me to go, but it's my choice now. It's my decision. Yeah. And that's true with our spouses, our children. Just accepting and being like, you know what? You get to choose. You get to decide. And I'm still going to support you, and I'm still going to respect you, and I'm still going to love you and trust you as much as I can. But I accept where you're at.
And in that, just a little side note here, you guys, if you're trying this, sometimes direct resources work. Sometimes direct resources backfire because they're like,
It
oh,
comes with an
I'm
expectation.
sending you this podcast that I just heard, this book that tells you why you're wrong.
Yes.
And they're like,
It has to be done.
I'll show you where you can put that book, right? So the approach is, no, I'm going to accept you right where you're at. And I'm going to keep reading. I'm going to read great books that are a meeting point for us. I just read the best book. I think you'd love it. And it's nothing to do with this issue. It's drawing us both upward and better. And so these resources, I actually just made a note right now. Thank you. I'm going to add a section in my Be the Man Masterclass to help men rebuild bridges they themselves have burnt, because there needs to be a resource for men to hear it from me, from somebody else, is saying, hey man, own that and rebuild that, right? And there's going to be other things out there like that. So man, this is good stuff all around. We got to take our daughter on a date right now. We're taking our 14-year-old daughter on a date for African food right now, so we're going to take her out. But you guys, thanks for being here. This is so special and so important. And it's such a privilege and opportunity to be parents and to be married and to program our kids. Deliberate or unintentional brainwashing. Like we're conditioning, we're training, right? We're always training. And I love the idea of pausing and saying, wait a minute, the way I treat Rachel in front of them, and whether or not she feels like her needs are being met, my needs are being met, we have a happy relationship, we're training them of what marriage can be like for them. Man, that matters. And it helps our marriage get better too. It's awesome. Okay. Love you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being wonderful people. Thanks for being good examples to your kids and being good people. Love you so much. There it is. Love you so much. Okay, you guys, have a great evening or day. Yael over in Australia. Bye, guys. Adios. Reach upward.